18 months ago, I had $340 in my checking account 3 days before payday, and I genuinely believed I would never save real money on my salary. Not because I didn't want to, because I tried before more than once, and it never stuck. I'd save $200, something would come up, and I'd be back to zero within 6 weeks. I was making $65,000 a year the entire time, the exact same salary I'd had when I had $340 to my name. 18 months later, I had $10,000 sitting in an account I hadn't touched. It's not $10,000 because I found some secret income stream. It's $10,000 because of one specific thing that happened a few months in that changed how the entire rest of the 18 months played out. And it wasn't a budgeting app, a spreadsheet, or cutting out coffee. I want to walk you through this the way it actually happened. Mistakes included, because I think just save more. Advice fails most people for the same reason it failed me the first 3 times. I tried. It doesn't fail because people lack discipline. It fails because it skips the actual mechanics of what changes when saving finally works. The first time I tried, I did exactly what every finance article tells you to do. I opened a savings account, calculated 20% of my take-home pay, and set a goal to move that amount every month. On $65,000, my take-home after taxes was roughly $4,150 a month. So 20% was $830. I moved $830 into savings the first payday and felt like I finally figured out adult life. By day 19 of that month, I transferred $300 of it back into checking to cover rent because I hadn't accounted for the fact that my paycheck landed on the 15th and rent was due on the 1st, which meant I was always floating on the previous month's income to cover the current month's bills. That left me with $530 actually saved from month 1. The second month, I moved $830 again, and within 2 weeks, I transferred back $450 because my car insurance renewed and I hadn't budgeted for it separately, leaving $380 saved that month. After 2 months, I had $910 sitting in savings, not the $1,660 I'd expected, and I felt like I'd failed again. Worse this time because I'd had a real plan and it still hadn't held. Here's what I didn't understand yet. I was trying to save a percentage of an income I didn't actually understand the shape of. I knew the total number, but I had no idea when money left and when it arrived relative to when bills were due. So instead of trying again with the same 20% number, I spent the next month doing something that felt embarrassingly basic. I wrote down the exact date every recurring expense, left my account, and the exact date my paycheck arrived. Rent on the 1st, paycheck on the 15th and the 30th, car insurance on the 8th, phone bill on the 22nd, streaming subscriptions scattered across 4 different dates. What this revealed was that I had roughly 12 days every month, between the 1st and the 12th, where I was almost always tight, because rent had just gone out and my next paycheck hadn't landed yet. Every previous attempt to save had collapsed during exactly this window, because I was trying to save the same fixed -1 regardless of where I was in that cycle. I wasn't bad at saving. I was scheduling my savings transfers on days when I didn't actually have the money to spare. That realization, in hindsight, was the actual turning point of the entire 18 months, more than any specific dollar amount. Once I could see the shape of my own cash flow on paper, I stopped guessing. Instead of one number moved once a month, I split my savings transfer to match my paycheck schedule instead of an arbitrary calendar date. $300 out of the 15th paycheck, the same day it landed, before it ever sat in checking long enough to feel spendable. $300 out of the 30th paycheck, same rule. That's $600 a month, lower than the $830 I tried before. But the difference is it actually happened every single time without needing me to feel disciplined about it. Over the next 3 months, I had $2,710 sitting untouched. That $1,800 plus the $910 left over from my earlier attempts. 3 months in a row without a single emergency transfer back into checking. Around that same time, my rent went up $40, and the system absorbed it without me having to intervene. I didn't adjust my transfer, and something smaller elsewhere quietly gave instead. Once that new system had been running steadily, I did something I'd avoided for years. I printed out 3 months of bank and credit card statements and went through every single line, categorizing each one. I found $34 a month into forgotten subscriptions I no longer needed. I found I was spending an average of $186 a month on food delivery, which I'd mentally filed as occasional, but was actually happening 2 to 3 times a week. And I found my grocery bill had crept up nearly $60 a month over the previous year, one slightly pricier substitution at a time. None of these were dramatic discoveries, which is exactly what made them so easy to miss for years. I canceled the 2 subscriptions, capped delivery at once a week to bring it down to around $70 a month, and started comparing unit prices, again at the grocery store. Total found money, $190 a month, discovered in a single afternoon, without earning a single extra dollar. With that $190 freed up, I raised my automatic transfer without waiting to feel ready. $600 a month became $750, split across both paychecks the same way, a $150 increase. Not the full $190. I left the remaining $40 sitting in, checking on purpose as breathing room. Since the whole point of the system was that it had to survive contact with real life, 4 months at $750 is $3,000, on top of the $2,710 I already had, bringing me to $5,710. Something happened during this period I hadn't expected. Once the leftover amount in checking was smaller than I was used to, I stopped making small discretionary purchases almost entirely on my own, without trying to, simply because there wasn't a comfortable cushion sitting there inviting me to spend it. Then came the real test. My car needed a $1,200 repair, all at once. The exact kind of expense that had wiped out every previous savings attempt I'd ever made. I remember the specific feeling of dread when the mechanic called. That old instinct kicking in that expected this to undo everything. I paid it directly from savings. My balance dropped from $5,710 to $4,510, and I felt almost nothing. No panic, no scrambling, no credit card. Just a lower number in an account and a car that worked again. Every prior version of me had. Treated an unexpected expense as a crisis that derailed the entire plan. This time, it was just a Tuesday. What came next is the part that gets skipped in almost every version of this story. And it's the part that actually made the difference. The following 4 months were boring and genuinely uneventful. Just $750 a month automatically landing the same 2 days every month, while my balance climbed from $4,510 back up to $7,510. I felt the temptation more than once to start second-guessing whether I was doing enough or to chase some new optimization. But I didn't change anything, because the entire previous attempts at saving had failed specifically during the moments when I tried to change something midstream. Consistency during a boring stretch isn't glamorous, but $750 times 4 is $3,000, and that $3,000 showed up exactly the same whether I was excited about it that month or not. The final 4 months followed the same pattern. $750 a month automatically. No changes, bringing the total from $7,510 up to $10,510, 18 months after I started with $340 to my name and a pattern of failing at this exact goal repeatedly. For years before that, I'd crossed $10,000. It didn't feel triumphant exactly. It felt more like quiet relief, the specific kind that comes from finally trusting yourself with something you doubted for years. Here's the full map laid out plainly. 2 false start months that netted $910. 3 months at $600 automatic transfers for $1,800. 4 months at $750 after finding $190. A month in forgotten spending for another $3,000. A $1,200 emergency withdrawal that didn't restart the clock. 4 boring uneventful months at $750 for $3,000. And 4 final months at $750 for another $3,000 total. Just over $10,500 on the same $65,000 salary I had the entire time. I didn't get a raise during these 18 months. I still went out with friends. I still ordered delivery, just less often. I didn't sell a kidney, learn to code, or start a business on the side. The entire difference between the version of me with $340 and the version of me with $10,000 came down to a handful of specific, boring, mechanical changes. Understanding the actual timing of my cash flow instead of guessing at it. Automating transfers the same day money arrived. Going through my actual spending once instead of assuming I already knew it. And then doing absolutely nothing dramatic for months at a time, when there was nothing left to fix. The part that surprised me most, looking back, is that the hardest month of the entire 18 wasn't the month my car broke down. It was one of the boring ones. The stretch where nothing happened, and it would have been easy to convince myself the plan wasn't exciting enough to keep following. Every previous time I'd failed at saving, it wasn't during a crisis. It was during a stretch exactly like that one, where I got bored of the plan and changed something before it had the chance to just keep working. So here's how you'd actually apply this. Start this week by writing down the exact date every recurring bill leaves your account and the exact date your paycheck lands. Not a budget, just a calendar. This month, set up an automatic transfer time to your paycheck date, not an arbitrary day of the month. At an amount low enough that it will actually survive contact with your bills. Lower and consistent beats higher and abandoned by week 3, every time. Over the next few months, go through 3 months of actual statements, line by line, looking for subscriptions and small, recurring charges that used to be conscious decisions and have since become invisible defaults. And going forward, when an emergency happens, because it will, let the money you've saved absorb it without treating the withdrawal as a failure of the entire plan. The version of me that survived a $1,200 repair without panicking is the same version of me that made it to $10,000 6 months later. I had $340 and a history of failing at this exact goal. 18 months later, on the same salary, I had over $10,000, and the difference wasn't willpower. It was a handful of boring mechanical decisions made once that kept working long after I stopped thinking about them every day. That's the whole story, and I think that's exactly why it worked.